Hey everybody, Jim Ingersoll here with Real Estate Success Podcast. I'm your host today, and I'm super excited to have Rich Lennon on with me. I want to thank all of our faithful subscribers. If you're not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button. Whether you're listening in iTunes or watching on YouTube, I've heard from a number of people over the last 10 days that have told me how the show has inspired them, how they're going back through all the old shows. And these are folks that I don't know. I've never met in person. They're from around the country. And so whether you're one of the people that sent me a little note through LinkedIn or through Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is, I greatly appreciate that because it keeps me going. It keeps me focused. So you guys are awesome. And the Real Estate Investors Success Podcast has been great for a long time. And I'm bringing back a good friend of mine today, Rich Lennon. We're both in the Richmond, Virginia market, and we're going to talk about a really important topic called Ponzi schemes. And first of all, right at the beginning, Rich and I want to tell everybody that we're not a CPA, we're not a lawyer. So if you ever want tax advice or you ever need legal counsel or advice, go to the lawyer. Take what we say at a grain of salt and go with it. We're not providing any kind of legal consulting in any way. We're just sharing sort of our perspectives on what we've seen. And personally, I've known people that have been in the middle of Ponzi schemes, what appears to be on purpose. I also have known people that have inadvertently fallen into short-term Ponzi schemes that have gotten out of them. So we want to talk about what a Ponzi scheme is, how to avoid it, and sort of what to do if you find yourself investing with somebody in a Ponzi scheme, or if you're a real estate investor and you over leverage and the wheels start to fall off. Hopefully we'll share some tips on how you can get back to ground zero and get everybody paid back and move on. Would you agree those are good topics for today, Rich?
Yeah, that's a great topic. And I think it's one that should be talked about.
Yeah, so. but it's a tough topic too. So we've got to approach it sort of carefully. A Ponzi scheme is basically investment fraud, right? How would you define it, Rich?
I think investor fraud is correct. I think specific to real estate investing, a lot of the Ponzi scheme, I think it's when you're borrowing money and you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Maybe that's just the easiest way to put it. And you see investors go down this path, and it happens on a small scale, and then it can kind of snowball. But what it really means is, you're probably borrowing money for saying you're going to do one thing with that money, and then instead you go do something else. And that's probably be the best way I think to describe a real estate Ponzi scheme.
And do you agree with my characterization that some people are intentional about creating it, and then others sort of slide in that hole into a bit of a rabbit's hole, and some get out and some don't?
Yeah, I think that there are two different types of people who kind of end up running Ponzi schemes, in my opinion. Yeah. I've seen both, and one is with deliberate and intent, and the other one is just a business person that didn't understand what their business was really doing at the time, and all of a sudden really found themselves in a financial hardship. And they made a bad choice on how to get out of that hardship. And, they probably just didn't seek advice from other experienced investors. I think all of us going through periods of scaling were probably at spots where, hey, we could have ended up as a Ponzi scheme. And when you're scaling, that's when you're most vulnerable to it. And you're doing so much so fast.
You get over leveraged pretty quick. And this follows up, like, if you guys haven't seen my podcast show with David Richter, go back and watch that, because we talk about knowing your numbers of your real estate investing, but also from the perspective of you've got to know those numbers or this could happen to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think most people that end up in a Ponzi scheme don't mean to be there. It's probably a lack of experience, and if they maybe a lack of ability to be humble as well, to humble yourself and say, wow, hey, I'm in trouble and I really need help. And that characteristic is hard as an entrepreneur, right? Where go, push hard, it's hard to have that vulnerability. It's hard to have that core group that you can talk to.
The old ego gets in the way, doesn't it?
It does. It destroys a lot in life. It does.
Well, there was a lot of Ponzi scheme activity in 2019. And of course, Bernie Madoff's probably the most famous. I love the way Super Q says Bernie Madoff with my money in the spirit of Quincy Long. But there were quite a few. Actually, I went back and looked, Rich. The first Ponzi scheme was named after Charles Ponzi, and it was in like 1920. That was almost 100 years ago. You know what I mean?
I bet, though, that like if you go back, I bet, the Ponzi schemes have been going on since there were coins, right?
Probably.
I don't know. Maybe since they're lending or something like that. But all right, Ponzi from the 1920s. I didn't know that. That's tell us that story. Like, what's the story of that?
I don't really know the story. I didn't have enough time to like give you the story, but go back, Google it. Charles Ponzi, 1919, 1920, and you'll see it. But there were quite a few in 1919 that came up. And I just want to highlight a couple of these, Rich. And I got them here. First one I wanted to highlight, this is news. I'm not giving you my opinion. I'm just reading the news. One of them was a real estate investor named Robert Shapiro, who pleaded guilty in August for leading a $1.3 billion real estate Ponzi scheme. He received 25 years prison. That's a long time. He defrauded over 7,000 investors. Among them, many of them were elderly and even included some famous people along the way, which isn't shocking. And then the SEC got involved and kind of shut that whole thing down. In August of 2019, a guy named Carl Chen, the owner of a Delaware-based real estate company called ChenMax, sentenced to 51 months in prison, pleaded guilty to fraud with a multi-year Ponzi scheme from 91 to 2017. That's a long time. And there were like 41 investors and $6 million, not billions this time. And then there was another one in Detroit with a guy named Victor. These are all, you can Google them and find them. And in September, there was another guy, Glenn Mahler, who's a property developer doing fix and flips, $41 million. And over 300 investors over 5 years. So there was a lot of activity in 2019, and that's how we ended up with this show today, right, Rich?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett's got a quote. I want to make sure I get it right here. But
love it.
It's only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked.
Oh, how does that apply to a Ponzi scheme? It's all good and then it's not, right?
Yeah, it's all good and then it's not. And when the Ponzi scheme typically starts to fall apart when you can no longer acquire, right? When you run out of the ability, either people won't lend you money or the market shift and you can't buy them. And so the money and the cycle of the new money coming in is when it dies. I mean, that's what happened with Bernie Madoff, right? Eventually the deposits can...
All of them.
Yeah.
They all crumble. It's like a dam that eventually breaks.
Yeah. And I think Warren Buffett does a good job of visualizing that with his quote. As the economy turns, we'll really see, who was real and who wasn't, and who was naked and who's not.
So I surveyed my real estate investor Facebook group, Rich, and I asked people like, how would you avoid a Ponzi scheme? I was just curious what people would say this week. I said, I'm preparing for this podcast, and I wanted to share some of these responses with you to get your feedback as well, Rich. First, Jane Garvey, thanks for your feedback. She said you should verify everything about the person and everything about assets to avoid to avoid getting entangled into a Ponzi scheme.
I would ask about the assets. I think maybe I would want to know everything about the collateral. Versus someone's assets. They could have a lot of assets, but if I
meant like the asset, like say with the real estate investor that's doing fix and flips or something like that, I think is what she means.
Okay, or the collateral, the property or whatever. Yeah.
I think Jane's referring to the collateral. Like, how important is it to separate some due diligence on both the asset and the person?
I think it's huge, and I think that you need to do both. And you need to start, actually, I think you need to start with the asset. You need to start with the collateral and, say, okay, is this a deal? And you need to do your own due diligence to make sure that it is. And then you owe a secondary due diligence on the person of, hey, and the person that I'm lending to, is that person trustworthy, and, do they have a good reputation, and do I think I can get my money back?
No, one of the folks commented like, we do more due diligence on our potential tenants than the people we lend money to.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good way to think about it.
Think about it,
Yeah.
because as a landlord, we check credit, we check references, we verify criminal background. We do a lot. We check their social media, a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But sometimes when we don't know how to underwrite a loan, we know how to qualify a tenant, but not underwrite a loan.
That's a great way to put it. I really like that. That's a great way to put it. That's a great observation, I think. Yeah, you don't underwrite it.
Yeah, and then Jane also had she had a number of good points. So Jane, if you're listening, thank you. But she said you really should review your loan docs carefully. Don't just ignore them. Like if they tell you you're in first position on a loan, then verify that you are, and avoid things like unsecured loans.
Yeah, I won't take an unsecured loan. I've had people offer me an unsecured loan, and I just won't take it. I don't think that is way too risky for the lender, and and way too risky for me, right? So if I'm saying, okay, I'm going to pay you back, then I got to pay you back, and if I don't have an asset tied to that, and I die, and like blah 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 happens, yeah, I just would never do that to a lender.
You hear these stories, Rich. Over the years, I have. This one goes back quite a few years, but there was a real estate investor that was basically just stacking mortgage after mortgage on the same property. And the folks lending the money on that didn't even know they were in fifth position, seventh position, ninth position. You see what I mean?
I think that people get lazy, and it's shocking to say, hey, I'm gonna lend someone $100,000, but then be lazy. But people have to do the due diligence. Isn't just on the value of the asset or the character of the person, but it really is like you say, you got to read the paperwork. And as investors, again, we're a bit squirrely. Like there aren't enough of us that really like go through and read a document. And the people that are most likely to get caught up in a Ponzi scheme are probably the most likely people not to read the documents.
Well, that's true. That's true. And she also said, check their references. And if you can, Jane recommended going to visit them on site, go to some of their job sites. It's all good due diligence. She also said, watch for lavish spending habits, not just like a trip here and there, and people that brag about it and display like this all reward, no risk mentality. This is where you get into like they're checking social media feeds and stuff like that.
You and I, Jim, are veterans, or we've both taken our punches in this business, right? And we know how hard it is. And so I think investors by their nature are kind of tight, frugal people. And so when you work, I do kind of think that the people that are in the room that are the loudest, that are buying everybody drinks, to me, that seems like they're spending someone else's money, because I work so hard for my money that I would never do that kind of stuff. And that's been an indicator for me too. So it's the lavish vacations, lavish trips, but sometimes it's also just the loudest person in the room buying everybody drinks.
That's a good point. It's a good point. When you're offered all the rewards and no risks, that should be one of the red flags you should look for. And these huge, lavish, like, private jets and going here and there every week should be some red flags for you, I would think.
Yeah.
Tom Olson had a few interesting points as well. He said, if you lend somebody money and the communication goes dark right after closing, that should be a red flag. Do you agree with that one?
I do agree with that one. I think that I don't know about right after closing. I think that you need to have regular communication with the people that are borrowing your money. You should be getting updates. You should be getting, how are things going? I think if people go dark, and it doesn't matter how busy you are, if you owe someone $100,000 and they text you more than once, that's a problem, right? We all are busy in our days, but that's a great point. Going dark is a bad indicator.
Yeah, it is. And then, another one would be like if if payments, if somebody's struggling to pay you back, like even your monthly payments, or if they ask for, they basically tell you they can't continue to pay. If they happen to communicate and say, I can't pay you for a period of time, that's a red flag, major red flag, I would say.
It's a red flag. I would definitely say that, but I would also say it's probably at least an indicator from the borrower that they recognize that there's a problem, and that they are at least being proactive. I'll share a story. I'll share a story with you.
Yeah.
I definitely, the late fall of, I've talked about this before.
Yeah.
In late fall of 2016, I could have become a Ponzi scheme. I think I was really working to scale only in the business, and I was buying lots of deals and having trouble on the construction side. And it was right around October or November of 2016 that I figured out it was going to be like February something in the next year, I was going to be short $250,000.
Yeah.
And I figured that out 3 or 4 months, and I could see it out there. And that's probably where, I had to make a decision. Do I want to be a Ponzi scheme, or was I going to go and fix my business? And I think a lot of people during scaling come across that situation. And what got me out of it is I went to my lenders, and then I went to my network and said, oh my God, I have this problem. And I'll never forget, I won't give his name, but one of a good friend and a good mentor, he just laughed at me. And he goes, hey, you stupid. Everybody does this. And
everybody over leverages.
Yeah, and they, restructure this over here. And do you have any collateral over here? And he really helped me really walk through that. And then, by the summer of that same year, I was like plus 400,000, because that cycle happens in the spring, and I wasn't experienced enough to get it. And for me, it was talking about it, being honest and looking for help that really saved me from I could have gone a different direction. And I think, anybody who scales probably in any business probably has that moment.
Yeah, I would agree. But okay, there's a few takeaways here for everybody listening and watching. Is if you run into a huge obstacle or a gigantic roadblock, or all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, you have an OMG moment there, don't bury your head in the sand. It's put your mind to work and leverage your network for help and get through it. If you're a person of great character and have high integrity, you'll find a way to get through it, especially if you have assets that can become liquid or whatever it is. So I guess the encouragement here, Rich, is if you're one of those really scaling up investors right now, you're doing more fix and flips or buying more rentals or whatever it is in the note space, and you hit that moment, don't run and hide, and don't think you're alone.
You're not.
But have integrity, have character, and reach out for help if you really want to get through it, because you'll find somebody to reach out that hand and pull you out of the quicksand.
And a lot of people listening to this podcast can reach out to you, right? I mean, that's why you put these investor groups together.
True.
And, I think people are afraid, if I tell Jim that something's wrong with my business, it's going to judge me. And no, you might end up just kind of chuckling at him and say, yeah, I've been there, and then you give them the advice. And,
right.
You've always been a very positive person and very encouraging person. And people listening to this podcast have you as a resource.
Well, and so that's good tips from Tom Olson as well. And it goes back to the character of the person and also the competency of the person, Tom also remarked, and I agree with that. So, okay, so that's if you're an active investor and you hit that obstacle and you have that OMG moment, we talked about that. What if you're a financial passive investor and you're investing out of your self-directed IRA or whatever it is with somebody, and they go dark, or you realize that all of a sudden you were giving unsecured loans without knowing it, or you're in second position or third position, or the payments start to become late and the person goes dark, what do you do then?
You have to act fast. You cannot hesitate.
Speed strategy.
You can stop doing something that you were doing, but you can't stop it until you started it. So you don't have to foreclose, but you need to start your process immediately. And time in, and you cannot hesitate at all. So let's say that you're in a Ponzi scheme and you don't know it and you're just kind of realizing it. You won't be the only lender that's realizing it. Other lenders will be realizing it as well. And so if you ever want a chance to get that money back, then you have to be first in line to go get it back. You can't allow someone to just put you off. You have to be aggressive about it. You have to contact attorneys. You have to contact the right agencies if you need to, but you cannot wait. And I see that happen a lot where people just wait, and then unfortunately they're like the last ones. And I've talked to people and it felt really bad for them. But there's just hesitant.
You know, it's the same as, I'll go back to the landlord example. Like if a tenant stops paying you, or if they're 5 days late, you're sending out a pay or quit. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden you got to start the process. And as a landlord, we're accustomed to doing that. The wheels are turning. It's the 5th. I haven't gotten paid. I'm going to send out a pay or quit. But as a note investor, you know, we don't take action as fast. And, you know, Quincy talks about the pain and the payment and all this stuff, but the key is to get help soon. Get the demand letter out, talk to a lawyer, get your legal help. Don't listen to my podcast on how to do it, but go get a lawyer and get some help quickly to get some professional legal help.
Yeah, that's a good time to say that we're not attorneys again and reemphasize.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
this is just what, you know, we've each seen as our own personal experience in the industry. And you have to seek the legal advice. Now, I'll just throw out this, like, I send the pay or quit to my tenants on the 6th,
Yep.
like not the 7th, not the 8th, that's
Right.
on the 6th. And I always, the most expensive thing for me to do is evict my tenant.
Right.
So just because I'm sending the pay or quit on the 6th doesn't mean I want that to end. What I'm doing is getting the attention of the person and saying, this is serious. It needs to be addressed. We have to have a plan here. I don't care what the plan is. Like, I'm just want to secure my asset. And sometimes I find that just starts the conversation.
It does.
You know, it pulls the person who maybe has their head in the sand, pulls it up a little bit, says, hey, you got to deal with this. And
you know, you call me like the loan doctor. I don't know. People that are struggling getting their payments come to me often over the last 5 years, or maybe even more than 5 years.
trust you.
So I've like been to like, well, the people may be listening, so I don't want to talk about even without names, but you know, I've sat down with couples that have loaned money, and I just had somebody a few weeks ago again, and you know, they lend out a lot of money and the payments stop coming in, or it goes beyond like a 6-month loan or beyond a 12-month loan, and they don't know what to do, so they don't do anything. And my advice is always go get a lawyer and get started. I mean, you've got to get over your fear factor. Some of them don't act, Rich, because they're afraid. Some don't act because they literally don't know what to do. And
Yeah.
so if that's one of our listeners right now, you're trying to figure out what to do, my advice is go get a lawyer, find some help, leverage your network to find the right lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's great advice. And it's not hard to hear sometimes. And, you know, you've been, I don't know if you've been a part of lawsuits, Jim, but I have, and they're terrible. And there's nothing good about them. And you don't want to enter one lightly. But you do sometimes need a lawyer to knock on someone's door to get their attention. And,
you know, and I've had somebody that I loaned to drag me out. So I guess I've been there, you know what I mean? And life changes for people, right? So this person began to have some marital issues, and then once I started pushing and you get the demand letter out, it's like, well, I'm just going to file bankruptcy. And so you've got to start that process no matter how big that pain point is. And if I had started earlier, it would have been better for me as well. So I've been where some of our listeners might be right now.
And it's hard, particularly if you probably did more than one deal with that person, right?
Yeah.
And then you did a lot of them, and then there became a comfort level, and then became a friendship level.
Yeah.
And
it's hard.
It is hard. And I will say that, you know, not everybody who is late paying back a loan is in a Ponzi scheme. That is not true. I promise you that I've had loans that expire on me that I've had to renew for my lenders and said, hey, I didn't get that done in 6 months. I thought I did, but I didn't. Right? I need 6 more months, or I need from 1 year to 2 years. I've gone back to those negotiating, and if you get in trouble, you should just go back and negotiate. Yeah, the lender, the most invested person in you as the investor is your money lender. They want you and need you to be successful, and they will help you be successful. They'll help you get through, and they should be an ally when things are going wrong. And people just, man, they just go dark. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all true. So this is an important topic. We talked about, what it is, how to sort of avoid it. We talked about how to recognize it and what to do if you're in it. So looking back, Rich, I mean, you've kind of identified an issue back in 2016 for yourself. How long did it sort of take you to migrate through that process? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? I mean,
I was really healthy by that summer of 2017. So, but that means it was
8 or 9 months.
Like October, 8 or 9 months. And it really, I had to get through. I had a bunch of houses. I had a bunch of inventory, and I had to liquidate that inventory. And I had to get through the spring season. And I was able to go to my lenders and say, listen, this is the plan here. Your house is still secured. It's still in a good position. We're going to get it on the market in the spring. And then it really worked out well. And the truth is, I probably have some of my strongest lenders from that time period, because they knew that if I was in trouble or I had a problem, that I would come and communicate
with your hand.
Yeah. And not any investor that I've ever had has ever lost a nickel with me. And there were times where it was, at times in that 2016 where I looked over and I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. And it really happens like when everybody's like, well, let's 10X my business. Hey, I want to do
10. Says it pretty easily, doesn't he?
Oh my God. Like that idea and concept cost me so much money. Now it probably put me farther ahead in the long run, but that was a difficult process. And
I talk about hope and removing fear and thinking big. I mean, we thrive on that stuff as an entrepreneur. No fear, 10X, scale, traction.
Yes. I'm a big traction fan.
Build systems and everything else will happen. But it's tough.
And I bought into that for a while. And like, I really pushing, hey, got to do more deals. And looking back, I like
as well, Rich.
I want to reach back and smack that guy. I don't know what he was thinking.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's just a natural part of being an investor. Like, we're aggressive, and then we want to push. And then if we weren't that, we wouldn't be in the business. We wouldn't be as far as we are. And it's just important to recognize your books, like David Richter said, and recognize your books and have someone you can trust. Someone like you, Jim.
Well, and you too, Rich. Well, I really appreciate this discussion today. You have anything else on the encouraging side to leave with our folks that are rolling in some real estate investing this year, Rich? 2020.
Real estate investing has never been better. We talked about a really hard topic today.
Yeah.
But real estate investing has never been better. I didn't say it at the beginning, but I'll make sure I say it on the end for those people who at the end of your podcast. I always want to thank you, Jim. You're the first one who really sat down with me, and you took time at Chick-fil-A one time.
I remember. You had a list this long. It was longer than my Christmas list when I was 7 years old.
Yeah, and I was determined then, and I'm determined now. But you've been a great mentor, and you really took me through some of the steps of real estate investing.
Well, it was neat because we both live in the Richmond area, but we met through CRE online, and I partnered with JP Vaughn on that. And she's been gone a while now, Rich, and I miss her. So I was actually thinking about her recently. So, and same thing. I mean, I'm really fortunate for my friendship with you and Stephanie. You guys have a great family. So I'm super excited for what you're doing and what you've done. And how many years you've been doing this now?
I guess we're coming up on 7 years.
Oh my gosh.
It seems like such a short time, but it
Yeah.
seems like such a lifetime ago. Like
Does.
my
Well,
life
it's
is totally
been
different.
quite a ride since we met at Chick-fil-A that day. And I just want to tell everybody I super appreciate Rich as well. It's a great family. So thanks for sharing a really hard topic today. I hope that it's helped a lot of listeners on how to identify if you're struggling and what to do if you are, and take some steps to really know those numbers in your bookkeeping, because it is super important.
Yeah, really.
All right, everybody. Thanks again to everybody who shares our content, leaves us reviews, and all of that great stuff. We'll see you again on another show real soon.